You know, I had originally planned on opening this video by jumping right into the meat of the situation, but then I realized that Frogger hasn't been in a real game since 2005, and hasn't been in one I played since 2001, and then I died a little inside when I realized that's 19 years ago. Ugh. I guess I probably have to explain who Frogger is then. So, back in 1981, there was an arcade game called Frogger, made by Konami. That's a bad sign. That consisted of guiding a frog across a street and over a river to reach the 5 inlets on the other side. Being a video game from the 80s, it's incredibly simplistic and repetitive. All you can do is move, and it was locked to a single static screen. But in its day, Frogger was still quite the success. The basic gameplay loop is fun in that high score chaser kinda way that classic arcade games are, but I'd take Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, or Galaga over Frogger any day. But successful video games get sequels, we know how it goes. Unfortunately, the people behind the scenes quickly run into the brick wall of creativity that is, how do we build an exciting follow-up to a game where a frog avoids traffic? There was an attempt at a sequel in '84 with the Atari game Frogger 2 3 Deep, which is ostensibly just the original game with 3 screens to go through instead of 1. Groundbreaking stuff here. After that, though, the fearless amphibian was more or less put to bed outside of endless arcade ports to 8 and 16-bit systems. Until a decade later, that is, when the PlayStation 1 started making the rounds. And for some reason, the company sitting on these dead arcade game licenses started popping out reboots left and right. Q*bert, Pac-Man World, Pong. You gotta be fucking kidding me. We all know Konami likes money more than life itself, so it only makes sense in 1997 that they'd feverishly dig through their mountain of hoarded IPs, yeet that shit to whatever developer would take it, and the frog would follow suit into the 5th generation. So, no title screen or nothing? Guess we're just pressing start, which brings us to the zone selector. Gameplay in Frogger, yes, that's what it's called, they couldn't think of anything more creative than that, is divided into 9 themes, and each of those themes, save one, is further divided into, slices that represent the individual levels.
Retro, Lake, Forest, Machine, Cave, Sky, Garbage, Desert, Jungle.
Only 4 themes are unlocked by default, and to get more you have to... just a second. Ah, yes. You have to find a golden frog. There's one hidden in a single level of each theme, and they unlock more themes when collected. You know, despite playing this game so much as a kid, I had no clue that's how you were meant to progress. The game doesn't tell you what the gold frogs do, or that a new zone has been added when you pick one up. That's actually your main goal. Collecting the golden frogs is all that really matters. You don't have to beat every stage. I appreciate that the game informed me of this. So let's hop, kill me, right into the first stage. And it's just Frogger. Same layout and everything. That's cute, I guess. You know what isn't cute? Frogger's model. Dear God, I don't know if it's some sort of layering mistake or something, but this poor green lad looks like a 4th-dimensional jumble of polygons. The rest of the game looks fine though, so we'll ignore that for now. Anyways, Frogger is a top-down platformer where your objective is to hop along in a grid-like fashion to save the 5 multicolored frog babies hidden in each area in one run. You have no way of knowing where they are, no map or radar or anything, so you'll have to tear through the 30 or so stages top to bottom to find them on your own. Pressing one of the 4 directions on the D-pad makes Frogger hop one grid square in that direction. You can high jump by pressing X, which moves forward 1 square in addition to letting you climb onto ledges and dodge certain enemies. Frogger has a croak button that should theoretically reveal the location of nearby frogs, but in practice, it does nothing. While you will hear a response croak if you're close enough, there's no visual indication of its direction, rendering the move useless. Frogger can also lick up a variety of bugs with his translucent mutated plasma tongue. These tend to just be for extra points, but can also on occasion be things like 1-ups or a speed boost. Just like the arcade game, whenever you explode a frog baby, you're sent back to a predetermined start point, which is where Frogger's simple premise begins to give way to the Sisyphusian nightmare beneath.
Problem 1. Position resets.
A huge chunk of the levels in Frogger 1997 are labyrinthian affairs that require a dozen playthroughs to learn where every frog is, let alone collecting each one and under the strict time limit without game overing. Even the stages that aren't mazes, or that have a fun gimmick, usually manage to dick the whole thing up by requiring long strings of repeated, nearly frame-perfect precision movements. That's a little hard to understand. It's kind of a weird abstract thing to complain about. So let's take a look at the specific level Frogger goes skiing for a better idea. In this level, Kermit the Fuck here slides around on a linear, icy slope, which is pretty fun at first, despite the strange way Frogger carries momentum. The baby frogs are dotted on the way down, and oh, did you catch the fuck up? It's a linear stage, with the frogs placed along the path. Every time you touch a frog, you go back to the start. And this is not the only level that's like this. Every time you finally get past a difficult section, you'll inevitably be devastated to learn that there are multiple frogs beyond that area, so you'll have to get past it multiple times. In a single run, even when there are frogs within visible distance of each other, you have to play the whole level again.
Problem 2. The timer.
Frogger has a constantly ticking away timer at the bottom of the screen, which resets each time you return to the starting point. The amount of time is different in each level, but they do share one thing in common.
That's not enough time!
For a game that appears to be so heavily based on exploring 3D environments, you sure don't get time to, explore. The time for each round in later stages is just barely enough to reach the further away frogs. This means you have to have every stage layout, every enemy pattern, and every frog location perfectly memorized beforehand. There just isn't time for you to be hopping around and searching.
Problem 3. The camera.
Now hold on there, Mr. Smart Guy. Why do you keep saying that everything has to be memorized? If you were actually good at the game and didn't have the reflexes of my arthritic grandma, you should be able to react on the fly to stage hazards.
Well, obnoxious internet comment guy, you're right for once. I should be able to use skill to clear a stage, even if I haven't tried it a billion times before. But there's a single obstacle that stands in the way of this little dream of yours.
The camera's a bit too fucking close.
I can't react to something sight unseen if by the time it enters my view, it's already killed me. I don't care if you're the 1982 Frogger Grand Champion. It doesn't matter how good you are at the game if you can't see anything coming. Jumping through these levels is like trying to fight someone alone in a dark room, only you have a match and they have night vision goggles. In some levels, that's almost literal. I figured this was done to keep the game running at 60 FPS, but it just isn't worth it. Yes, the game does look good. The environments are interesting and detailed. I really like the machine levels in particular, but it would have been a much better choice to lower the graphical fidelity in exchange for a higher FOV.
Problem 4. Even the movement. God damn it.
Okay, so maybe you're still not on board with what I'm saying. Maybe you're a genius with superhuman reflexes who likes playing the same level a minimum of 5 times for some reason. Well, I got bad news for you. Even the basic controls are janky and nonsensical half the time. You might have actually figured out the problem from simply looking at the gameplay, because it's fairly obvious. The game requires you to go fast and react quickly, but is also locked to a grid. This grid is not only a pain to interpret, the game is also in 3 dimensions. This means areas also have depth to them, and being a top-down game, judging that depth correctly at a moment's notice is nigh impossible. Even a small change in height can be just enough to make Frogger miss his jump you thought he could make. That's provided he doesn't just phase through the thing you're jumping on for no reason, as he tends to do. This issue mostly crops up when objects are very small and fast, moving diagonally, or moving in a circle. So all of the objects then. The timing for when the game decides Frogger is locked to the next platform might as well be random. And remember, you don't have time to wait for the platform to swing around again and wait for a better jumping angle because you're on the clock. So I know I haven't said much, but that's pretty much it for Frogger on PS1. There's really not much to talk about. The basic concept is solid, and the presentation is nice, but everything about the execution is a frustrating mess. Lives are too limited, and the overall structure is too unforgiving. This is something the developers even acknowledged later on. In the PC version, which was released 2 months later, you have 5 lives by default, as opposed to the PlayStation version, which only has 3. It's not a huge change, but it is something, I guess. Sadly, no fix was made for the camera or timer, which were infinitely bigger problems than the life count. In the end, Frogger 1997 is a mediocre game with some nice visuals, and for some reason a really good soundtrack. I've been playing it throughout the video. I played this game so much as a kid though that I still have a lot of nostalgia for it, even if it isn't very good. I still will pop it in once in a while and play the 10 or so stages I think are good before rage quitting a half hour later. The game is almost all trial and error, with very little skill or timing required. I'd wager a good 50% of all my deaths were the result of something I couldn't see speeding in off screen and flattening my poor froggy friend. It isn't unplayable, and if you like simplistic games with a ton of repetition, I can see you getting some enjoyment out of it. It's not all bad. I mean, someone was playing this game. Unbelievably, Frogger was the 26th best-selling PS1 game of all time. I know that doesn't sound too impressive, but for reference, that means it beats Spyro 3, Tony Hawk 2, Crash Team Racing, Final Fantasy Tactics, Driver, Siphon Filter, and relevant to this channel, Silent Hill, and all 4 Twisted Metal games. Think about this the next time you use something's popularity to denote its quality. But we aren't done yet today. As I just said, Frogger on PS1 was a huge hit in terms of sales, and despite its poor critical reception. So in response, Konami ripped the license from Sony Cambridge and tossed it over to Blitz Games, tasking them with creating a sequel that could fix the giant glaring flaws with the original.
God has left us.
Welcome to Frogger 2 Swampy Revenge, which is actually Frogger 4, but quick, don't think about that. Here, look at more FMVs. So, for some reason, there's a story this time around. One of the alligators that Frogger's been jumping on all these years, named Swampy, is fed up with being a low-tier abused NPC and decides to take revenge on the fly-sucking chump and his family. He does this by somehow abducting every single one of the baby frogs in the entire area right in front of Frogger and his new girlfriend Lily. Frog puns. And they don't notice the giant reptile stealing their kids at any point in this process. You know where this goes next. Frogger and Lily have to jump, flip, and lick their way around the world and beyond to save 5 frog babies in each level, and eventually stop whatever Swampy is planning to do with them. The game plays much the same as the first PS1 game, hopping around with grid-based movement, licking up bugs, and croaking to find missing frogs, which works this time around, imagine that. As far as new abilities go, we've still got the high jump, but now it can be extended by pressing jump again into a sort of double jump glide. This opens up a ton of movement options because it lets you cross gaps, something that couldn't be done in Frogger 1 despite how simple it seems. The camera has been pulled out considerably and now sits on an angle and moves dynamically, making navigation much easier, and levels more obviously denote on the ground where the movement grid lines up through the use of varying patterns. This does come at the cost of the frame rate, lowering it from 60 FPS to somewhere near 25 or 30, but if the alternative is not being able to see where I'm going, I'll take the hit. This means Frogger's reaction to your movement input is a little slower and not quite as snappy and responsive, but since the timer has been removed, you're no longer in that much of a rush anyway. Oh yeah, that's the biggest change here. Frogger 2 is a linear stage-to-stage platformer. The levels are now structured with baby frogs as sort of a formality. They're placed along the path in usually impossible to miss places. The stages don't have exits, they just end when you collect all 5 frogs, but the last frog is always at the end of the area anyway. God help you if you missed one, though. They do mess with this setup a little, because there are 2 or 3 levels that are laid out similar to Frogger 1, where you collect a frog, then go back to the start, then get another, and so on. The difference here is that when these levels bring you back to the beginning, they also tend to open a new path, meaning that while the level is no longer straightforward, you aren't playing the exact same challenge 5 times. That's not to say the game is a complete straight line that doesn't offer any incentive to look around. Each level now has 25 frog coins to collect, and having them all when you finish the stage will unlock some extra content. Either a new arcade-style The Frogger level, or characters to use in said levels. There's also these par trophies you get for completing the stage within a certain time frame. Bronze, silver, or gold. These do nothing. So I never bothered getting them, but it's cool to have the little bit of extra challenge for people who want it. Cause trust me, if this game needs anything, it's more content. Frogger 2 can be 100%ed in 3 or 4 hours, and even that's kind of pushing it. But hoo boy, do we cover a lot of ground in that short time. Frogger and Lily catch up with Swampy on the edge of the pond, but he distracts them by chucking some frog babies into the somehow nearby Aztec temple and volcanic anthill. While the frogs are busy, Swampy goes to the unattended rocket launch pad in the middle of this empty field and flies off into space. When Frog and Pink Frog catch up, they find that the power has been turned off, so Lily goes to the nearby plant to turn the power on so Frogger can take the rocket into space. Frogger is in space now, this is happening, and you can't stop it. Swampy goes to a satellite where he... well, let me just show you. He shot himself into space to broadcast a commercial for his new game. I feel like there was probably a simpler way to do this. Just as Frogger finds him, the cold-blooded indie dev jumps through his space teleporter, which brings the pair to his secret base beneath a haunted house. And this is a game about a frog that crosses the street, right? Down in Swampy's factory, we find that he's somehow converting the frog babies into video games, and I just don't know anymore. Frogger and Lily are locked up, but one of the little frogs named Tad manages to escape and fuck up all the machinery, saving all the baby frogs, destroying the factory, and killing Swampy, I guess? Oh, no, wait, there he got away in a UFO at the last minute, okay. And that's pretty much it. The story only takes about 2 hours to finish, and then all that's left are the classic levels. And there's a lot of them, but I'm just not super into how simplistic they are. Overall, Frogger 2 Swampy's Revenge is a grand improvement on the previous game, and is a genuinely fun and wacky platformer. The graphics and designs are cartoony and stylized, the gameplay is solid, if not basic, and a bit easy. The music continues to be way better than any game based on a frog has any right to be. I'd recommend you play it, but only if you can get it for real cheap, like sub $20 cheap. Not because it's bad or anything, it's just that you'll have seen everything the game has to offer in one night of playing. Frogger didn't end or anything after his PS1 outings. The series did still truck on for another decade or so afterwards, but it never saw the same heights of popularity. I remember liking one of the GBA games, but I fell off the Frogger train shortly after. The various developers started getting very confused about what it is people liked in the first place, and the series went in a lot of strange, hideous, and just generally not good directions. I might have to cover this disaster at some point, so be prepared for that. But nowadays, Frogger is just a name slapped on whatever weird version of the arcade original is budgeted out to whatever system for $15. And considering that the franchise is owned by Konami, and won't even make games on their successful and popular properties anymore, I don't think anyone should be expecting anything from Frogger anytime soon. Hey, welcome to the end of the video, and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like down below the video, and subscribe if you would like to see more videos about things like old obscure games and shit like that. Or don't, I can't tell you what to do. Remember to practice social distancing guidelines. Keep yourself safe, and have a great day. Bye, guys.